Okay, cool. So we're live for the first test heads of 2021. So thanks to everyone for joining, and thanks to everyone for the support last year. We had, since we moved online in March, the numbers have been great. The views on YouTube have been really, really good. And just people have been getting in touch with different topics and suggestions they want to hear for 2021. So we're trying our best to get speakers from all over. And obviously, as we said before, the fact that it's online means we can have different speakers from the States, from the UK, from Ireland, from Europe. We're delighted that Lizzie's joined us tonight. One of Lizzie's colleagues spoke for us a couple months ago. It was an excellent talk, so she highly recommended Lizzie, so no pressure on her at all. I'll leave Lizzie just to introduce yourself in a second, if that's okay. She's just telling us, obviously, from living in Edinburgh after moving to Berlin to enjoy the sights of lockdown in Berlin, so I hope that's going well for you. But we'll hand over to you, Lizzie. Generally, what we'll do is any questions anyone has during the talk, the Q&A box is there. So if you want to throw any questions in, we can pick them all up at the end, or if there's anything relevant during the talk you want to do, you can raise your hand. I'm sure Lizzie can spot it as well and go from there. But if it's okay with Lizzie, we'll have plenty of time at the end after 30, 40 minutes for any questions you have and any discussions, and we can go from there. So Lizzie, over to you. Thanks a minute for joining us.
Cool, thanks very much. Yeah, so firstly, thanks to Patrick and Darren, the TestHeads team, for having me, and thanks for joining. I'm glad you've all logged on tonight. So I'm Lizzie, and I'm a data scientist at Split.io. So Split's an experimentation and feature flagging platform. And as you probably guessed from the title of this talk, I work on the experimentation side. So as a data scientist, I spend kind of some of my time coding and implementing statistical tests and algorithms to generate the results of experiments, and then some of my time trying to improve the platform in a way that encourages some best practices and help people get the most out of experimentation. And as you just heard, my colleague Talia gave a talk a few months ago now, and Talia's talk was all about testing in production. In a way, I hope that my talk today is going to kind of follow on from that. There's sort of a next step that you can take. So Talia was talking about how you don't really care if your feature's working in staging. What you really care about is if it's working in production. But then what I'm going to talk about today is just because it works, you don't need to stop there. You can go ahead and test even further and check exactly how your feature is affecting your customers, and you can measure if it's actually bringing real value. So all about experimentation. I'll try and cover why you should experiment, how you can experiment and how it helps, and then some best practices for experimentation. The best practices I picked, there's a bunch, but the ones I picked, I hope will still be useful even if you're not able to experiment right now. So they're kind of good practices, good guidelines to follow whenever you're interpreting data and you're trying to run an analysis to make a decision. But before we get there, take a step back and talk about exactly what experimentation is. So usually in this context, it's kind of technically online controlled experimentation. And sometimes you'll hear it called A/B testing or split testing, but essentially it's just an experiment where everything is held constant and everything is controlled except for one particular variable which you're changing. So everything is exactly the same except that one thing. And that one thing, it might be like the color of a button, it might be the text on your site, it might be invisible backend change. But the main thing is that everything else is the same except for that one specific thing that you're trying to test. And I like this fun fact because as you heard, I used to be in Edinburgh, so I spent most of my 20s in Edinburgh. And apparently the first documented experiment was run way back in the 1700s by a doctor from Edinburgh. And so the story goes that at a time when lots of sailors were dying because of scurvy on the voyages on these ships, this Scottish doctor, he hypothesized that the reason they were dying was because of, or the reason they weren't dying on Mediterranean ships was because of the citrus diet. And so he tested this by running an experiment. And in this experiment, on one particular voyage, he gave half of the sailors limes, and then the other half ate just their normal diet. So the only difference there was these limes. And as you guess, this was a success. So by adding in limes to the sailors' rations, they were able to make fewer sailors die. And I heard that this is where the British get the name lime meats from, apparently. But then fast forward to today, experimentation has totally evolved and it's kind of found everywhere now. So if you're on social media platforms, you're probably in a whole bunch of experiments without even realizing. Admittedly, they're probably for less noble causes than trying to stop people dying. And this here on the right is an image. It's a story about a guy who kind of hit the jackpot with Instagram. So he found out that he was in an Instagram experiment, which meant that he never saw any advertisements on the Instagram platform. And so in this way, Instagram is probably running an experiment to understand if how showing adverts impacts user behavior and user engagement rate. So it's a really powerful tool to be running A/B testing and experiments, and loads of people are using it. I'm going to try and explain why it's so valuable. But how it actually works, like behind the scenes, is not too complicated. So it can be pretty simple. So the way it works is that when someone comes to your site or your product or your app, you randomly assign them into a group. And this random assignment, it can be as simple as just like a random number generator, right? So if someone comes to your site, maybe you pick a number between 0 and 1 randomly. And if that number is less than 0.5, then they'll go and see that first. They'll be in that first group and see, say, version A. And if the number is higher than 0.5, then they'll see version B. And then they get a slightly different experience depending on which version they're in. And then that slight difference, as we said, is only that one thing that you're trying to measure, so that one change. So basically, people come to your site, you sign them into a group, they get a slightly different experience, you let it run for a while, you collect the data, and then you decide which one works better. And I've kind of simplified that last step there about deciding which one works better. It's a bit more complicated, but there are a bunch of like online calculators and tools that can help you do that step pretty easily and hopefully make a quick and easy decision about which one works better and which one you should then put live and which one you should go with eventually. Cool. So simple enough, but what's the point? Why should you go to the whole trouble of running an experiment in the first place? Well, the number one reason, and the main reason, if you ask me, is that experimentation helps you ensure that you're delivering value. So it's not really enough to just know that your feature works and stop there. You should really make sure that you're actually delivering value and you're actually helping out your customers or improving your business in some way. So if you think about the last feature that you released or the last thing you worked on, well, what was the original goal of it? I'm going to guess it wasn't just to release for the sake of it. There was probably some higher level business objective, like improving customer satisfaction or improving business revenue. So just because your feature works, it doesn't mean you've actually achieved that goal. But by using experimentation and by looking at the data, then you can really measure and make sure that you are achieving that original goal that you set out for yourself. And then it really helps make sure that you're investing your time in the right places. So this is more important than ever because we're moving faster than ever. So I'm just about old enough to remember when software updates came on CDs and you had to go to the store, get the latest CD of version of AOL or Microsoft. But that was years ago, and now today you have companies like Netflix and Facebook, and they're releasing hundreds of times a day. So much faster and lots of small incremental changes. But then with all this speed, are we actually delivering more value, or are we just shipping shittier software faster? Well, that's where experimentation comes in, right? And you can't just assume that you are delivering value just because your feature works, because it's actually quite a bit rarer than you might think to get it right. So Bing did a study a while ago now. It's quite a popular study where they used experimentation to measure how many of their features, how much of their releases actually improved the metric that they intended to. And what they found was that 80 to 90% of the time, so like 8 or 9 features out of 10 didn't improve the thing they were hoping to improve. So most of the time they're wrong. Most of the time, most people are wrong, right? And maybe if you're a smaller company, you might have a better success rate, but still you're not going to be right most of the time. And that's okay, right? So it's really important to normalize that a lot of the time our intuitions are going to be wrong. And that doesn't mean that it's a failure as long as you learn in the process. Because it's always better to know what's really happening. Right, so I'm sure you'd rather know that your customers aren't really fussed about what you're working on before you go and spend more time working on it. So experimentation is super valuable to start focusing on value rather than speed. So rather than like trying to release as many features as you can, as quick as you can, and calling that a success, you can start focusing on the actual value that you're delivering for your customers and thinking about the outcome of your work rather than just the output. And at the end of the day, that's better for both your customers and for you as a business. Cool. And then the second big reason of why experimentation is really useful, I think, to do is that it lets you listen to and it lets you learn from your customers. So you don't just need to know that your feature works, but you can really understand so much more about how your customers are interacting with a feature, how it's impacting them, how you've changed their behaviors, and how you've changed the entire experience. There's so much that you can learn by using the data and by running an experiment. And this is a term called HIPPO, maybe some of you have heard of. It stands for highest paid person's opinion. So usually it's used in a situation when like decisions and kind of product direction, and those kind of decisions are driven by the highest paid person, or like the loudest person, or the most senior person. And this really isn't great, because as we know from that 80 to 90% number, our intuitions just are often wrong. But without the data, it's really hard to change that, because what else are you going to do? So that's why experimentation can really help us by getting rid of the HIPPO, stop just listening to that highest paid person's personal opinion, and start being more data driven. And it starts lets your customers start driving your roadmap rather than the HIPPO. Because as well as using experimentation as a decision-making tool, it's also really valuable to help learn more about your customers, and then get those insights, kind of understand how your work is impacting them and where you should focus your attention. And once you've got a few experiments behind you, you can really start to build a picture of how they respond to the work you're doing, like where's the low-hanging fruit and which area should you work on next. So it's super valuable to use experimentation to understand your users more and let them really influence where you spend your time and your resources. Cool. And then the third big reason of why you should experiment is that it enables safe and fast releases. I've had a few reminders this recently. We were talking about Slack at the beginning there. So for me, on my first day back at work this year, I think it was the first Monday of January, Slack was down for like most of the day. So we had no way to talk to each other, and no way to fill each other in about Christmases. So big disaster. And also Google was down in December. So like some of the world's most used tools like Google Docs, Gmail, YouTube, they were all down for a while. So my point here is that no matter how advanced your team is, there's always the chance that something is going to go wrong. And that's why experimentation and feature flags can really help you get that extra safety with your rollouts. So yeah, feature flags are super useful because you've got that kill switch. So if something goes wrong, you can quickly revert. But by tying measurement to feature flags and by running an experiment, it gives you even more safety, because you can quantify exactly how confident you are before you move to a next step. So you can run a gradual rollout where you slowly increase the number of users that see your new feature, your new deployment. And this lets you kind of be completely in control of the risk that you take at each step of the way. So it's something that my team does quite a lot. We'll often start with a small subset of users, like 5%, and then we'll let them use the feature, let them be in an experiment, let it run for a while, collect the data, and then we'll work out how confident we are given what we've seen. And then if we feel confident enough, then we move to a next stage, increase that, ramp it up to a larger audience, and do that again until we feel pretty safe with what we're doing, and then we'll run an experiment. And of course, the benefit is that if something does go wrong at one of those early stages, then you've really limited the number of users that you've annoyed. Okay, so here's a graph with some numbers. I hope it's not too off-putting, but one thing to be aware of here is that the smaller the audience that see your experiment, the less sensitive your experiment is going to be. So here on the x-axis, we've got number of people, and on the y-axis, the smallest change that you're likely to detect. And it's just an example, because the actual numbers will depend very much on the specific setup and the specific metric that you're testing. But this just is trying to illustrate that with having a small controlled group of users in that initial rollout, you don't have very much sensitivity, right? You're not going to be able to detect anything except huge changes. So that's why it works to slowly increase the number as you go from different levels of confidence until you're feeling ready to just let it run. For an example of how you might use this, let's say, imagine you're feeling pretty cautious about a new feature. So you want to start small and just let 100 people see your new feature. You can see here by reading off this chart that if 100 people are in the experiment, in this particular example, you would only be able to see degradations that are bigger than 35%. So if you don't see any issues come up in this stage, then you can be pretty confident that there's nothing worse than 35% degradation. but you can't really say anything about smaller ones. So there might be 20% tank in your metrics. So that's why you do another step. So maybe you ramp up from 100 to 2,000 users. And then here, if you don't see anything, it gives you enough confidence to say that there's nothing worse than a 9% degradation. And maybe you want one more step and go up to 20,000 users. And then here, this will give you the confidence that there's nothing worse than a 3% degradation. So by doing this in these stages, and using experimentation, you can really quantify exactly how confident you are at each step. And if it's not enough, then you can maybe let that experiment run for longer until you've got enough confidence to expose more of your users. And once you've got to this stage of knowing there's nothing worse than a 3% degradation, you're probably feeling pretty good, and then you probably feel okay to just let it go, let that experiment run, and then come back at the end and then look into the data to get those insights and learn from your customers. Cool. And then similarly, one other benefit of using feature flags and measurement is that it helps you really quickly pinpoint when something is going wrong, what exactly is it that caused that issue. So if only a small subset of users are actually seeing your feature, then when you start to look at the metrics globally, as from the whole of your site or your product, it's really easy for those metrics, those users that got affected, to quickly be washed out. And it's hard to know when there's a big issue if only a small set of users are affected. So this graphic here is trying to illustrate a particular example when, let's say you've got 3 new features and you're releasing them behind 3 experiments, and there's 10% of users in each of those. So here, if you're looking at a feature by feature basis and using experimentation, so in the right panel, then what you'd be able to see is that feature 2 is actually causing a 40% of users to see an exception or an error. But then on the other hand, if you didn't have that kind of extra lens of experimentation, you're just on the left-hand panel there, and you're just using a standard APM analytics tool, then all you'd actually see is that 2% of users saw an exception, and you don't really have any idea what it is that's causing it. So this is why by using experimentation, you can kind of reduce that time to fix an issue, and you can know straight away which feature is causing the problem, and you can just flip that kill switch or revert it, and it saves you a lot of time and reduces the number of users who are going to be affected by whatever has gone wrong. Cool. So I mentioned about the comparison between analytics tools and APMs and experimentation, and this is something that comes up a lot. So people often ask us, like, why do I need to go to all the effort of running an actual experiment, and why can't I just keep a close eye on my metrics by looking at the data and the analytics? Well, experimentation gives you like a bunch more rigor and accuracy. And these are the 3 reasons why it's so much more beneficial to run a proper randomized experiment than it is just to keep an eye on the data. So the first one is that experimentation allows you to remove external influences from the data. So there's always going to be a whole bunch of things that are changing in the world all the time, of course. And then any change that you see to your metrics, but it could be due to the work that you've been doing, but it could also be due to things like a new advertising campaign, news stories, or like the weather. So it's really hard to know, just because your metrics change, what part of that you impacted and what part was impacted just by all the other changes that are going on in the world. So maybe it's a really hot day, and then more people are away from their computers. So you see your metrics go down, fewer users. Well, you don't really know then if that was because of the change that you made or just because of these external influences. And so that's why it's really useful that experimentation can cut off this line and stop all the other changes in the world affecting your metrics. And that's because it keeps everything the same, because you're testing both versions at the same time. So if there is difference in the weather or some news story, it's going to equally affect both sets of users, both the people that saw your original version and the people that saw your new version. Cool. And then onto the second way that experimentation is super valuable is that it helps us distinguish noise from a real meaningful signal that we should try and interpret. So there's always going to be noise and randomness in this kind of data. So, your customers that come today are going to be slightly different to your customers that come tomorrow, and your metrics are always just going to fluctuate up and down just by themselves, just by randomness. And we can't avoid that. We can't take that away. And a way to think about this kind of noise is like if you imagine flipping a coin 1,000 times, and because you're trying to run an experiment about whether this coin is biased, so if it's more likely to land on heads or tails. Well, even if you have the most perfect, absolutely fair coin, you're still actually really unlikely to get exactly 500 heads and 500 tails. So just because you get something like 490 heads and 510 tails, it doesn't mean that the coin is biased, right? Because it's just that random noise. So by using the statistics of experimentation, we can measure like more information about the distribution of the data and the variance of the data, and it gives us a way to determine if the difference that we see is too big to be just due to normal variations. So it gives us the way to know how likely it is that the measurement that we saw, or if it actually indicates that there's something else going on, that the change that we've made, the thing that we're testing really did have an impact. So that's where statistically significant comes in. So it's a term you hear a lot in experimentation. It's kind of like a stamp of confidence that the thing that you've measured is actually meaningful. And it means that the result that you've seen just is very unlikely to have occurred just by chance. So if we get 400 heads and 600 tails, it's probably very unlikely to be by chance. So it's significant, and it means that something else is going on, and you can run away with this result and go and draw your conclusions and interpret it. But if you don't reach statistical significance, then it's a bit of a harder situation, because basically you haven't been able to rule out the fact that it could just be random noise. So it's not really safe to then go and say that the change that you made really caused that difference in the metrics that you've measured. Cool. And then the last one, last way that experimentation helps us is that it removes human biases. So there's a whole bunch of human biases that will mess with how we interpret data, how we think, and how we make decisions. So for example, there's a human tendency to see patterns in data when there isn't really anything there. And then there's this bias where we tend to overweight evidence that agrees with what we already believe, or maybe we focus on a particular piece of evidence that agrees with what we're hoping to be true. And so by running a very tightly controlled scientific experiment, we can kind of remove all these biases, and we can make sure that we're clearly listening to the data, and in a way it lets us hear the voices of our users much more clearly without us being subconsciously influenced by our own desires to be right. Cool. So hopefully I've managed to persuade some of you of the value of experimentation and why you should use it. So for the last bit of this talk, I'm just going to cover some best practices. As I mentioned, they're for experimentation, but they're also just good guidelines to follow whenever you're trying to use data to make a decision. So the first one, it's always a good idea to start with a hypothesis. An hypothesis is like a prediction of what you expect to happen, or some kind of statement that you're hoping your data will support or prove or disprove. And here's an example template taken from Craig Sullivan of how you might want to structure your hypothesis. So if we look at the simple kit, an example hypothesis might be because we saw fewer people sign up for TestHeads talks when they were browsing on their mobile, then we expect that changing the layout of the website to be more appropriate for mobile users will cause more mobile users to sign up for talks. And we'll measure this using the metric signups per user who visited. So simple enough, but it's super valuable to really clearly set out in advance what you're going to look at, how your analysis is gonna work, and why you're expecting it to change. And the reason for this is because, well, if you torture the data long enough, it will confess to anything. And it's a common saying, but it is definitely true. So if you don't predefine exactly which metrics you're going to look at and your analysis step, then you're probably going to end up kind of digging through the data and looking for something which gives you a signal, something which probably gives you something to go on and which you can interpret. But the risk with this is that if you do go looking for something, you will probably eventually find something, but it doesn't mean that it's actually meaningful. So this comic, XKCD comic that I like, which kind of shows this in action for a badly run experiment. So it's all about this idea that scientists were trying to test if jelly beans cause acne. And then they didn't see it initially, but then they decided to go and slice and dice the data and look at jelly beans of all different colors and see if there's any link there. And so the problem with this is they've gone and they're looking for a signal, and they're testing 20 different colors of jelly beans. So if you test 20 different hypotheses, you have a much higher chance of running into a false positive result. You're probably going to keep looking at different things until you find something which gives you a signal. And the best practice here would actually be, once you see this link between green jelly beans and acne, you should then rerun a test, and then this time the green jelly beans will be specifically called out in your hypothesis. Yeah, so it's a good practice always to stick to what you originally intended to test. And if you have some evidence which gives you kind of another way of looking at things or suggests something else is going on, that's great, but then run another test just to verify that what you're seeing is actually meaningful. Cool. So another important thing to keep in mind whenever you're looking at data, especially when you're running an experiment, is the metrics that you're going to use for the analysis. And there's no best metrics to use because it totally depends on the business and on the thing that you're trying to measure. But these are some key characteristics of a metric, of what make a good metric. So firstly, ideal metric will be meaningful. So it's got to be something which actually captures real direct business value, or something that you really care about. So for example, you probably don't want to try and focus on improving the number of clicks on a particular button because that's interesting, but it's not really indicative of actual value. And then the next characteristic is that an ideal metric should be sensitive. It's a pretty hard one because you can't make a metric sensitive if it isn't. And there's lots of times when we want to measure something that just isn't inherently sensitive. And by sensitive, I mean that the metric should change by small changes in user behavior. So it shouldn't be something which is really hard to move. So for example, retention or churn rate are not sensitive metrics. That's because they take a long time to move, and they don't change by much. So ideally you want something which is easy for you to move. And then metrics should also be directional. And this just means that if it goes up, you know instantly whether that's a good or bad thing. And if it goes down, the same. And an example of a non-directional metric could be, so let's say number of purchases per session. Well, if that goes down, you probably think that's bad, but it could also be that because you're adding more content to your site, you're increasing the number of sessions. So maybe your total number of purchases is the same, but your metric has actually gone down because of something you've done, which is bringing more value to your customers. So it's a bit tricky, especially with those ratio metrics. But your ideal metric is going to be directional. It's going to be really easy to interpret as soon as you see whether it's gone up or down, or if this is good or a bad thing. And then finally, metrics should be understandable. So at the end of the day, you're going to need to convey what you've done and what you've measured to business execs and to leadership. So it needs to be understandable by anyone in the business. And this is a bit of a silly example of people who didn't really follow these good guidelines. So it's a story about a Chinese shoe company who they ran an Instagram ad with a fake hair across the image. So their thinking was that people would be browsing on their phones and they'd see this and they'd think that there was a real hair on their phone, and they'd just try and swipe it away with their thumb. So they probably are going to get more people accidentally clicking on their ad, but it's not actually bringing real business value. So this is an example of gaming the system, of trying to end up with a positive, significant metric when you're not actually bringing any new value. So maybe here the better thing would be to measure sales. Are they getting new shoe sales because of this? And then still on metrics, one thing to think about is be aware of measuring just one single metric. So it's always a good idea to also measure some guardrail metrics so you can kind of keep an eye on what's going on below the surface. So maybe these are things like page load time or latency. And they don't necessarily need to tie back directly to business value, but it's still really good to have them to know how you're affecting those kind of metrics and know that you're not degrading them slowly just in pursuit of that one KPI, that one main metric. Yeah, so always good to kind of have a good view generally of how you're affecting things, even if that's not your main hypothesis and how you'll make your decision. But at the same time, you don't want to go and test too many metrics because you run into issues like we looked at with the jelly beans example. So a good handful and then a good handful of guardrail metrics that make sure you're not doing something you didn't intend to do. And then one final best practice, one thing to keep in mind always is business cycles and seasonality. So yeah, whenever you're getting a chunk of data and you're going to analyze it and try and make a decision, especially when you're running an experiment, you want to make sure that you have one full business cycle at least, and that's so that you've got a representative sample of your users. So this image here is showing number of searches for swimsuit and for ski jacket. So as you can see, this is very yearly seasonality. More people search for swimsuits in the summer and for ski jackets in the winter. And this is yearly, but you probably have a like business cycle or seasonality and daily. So you probably have more business users maybe searching your product or your app during the day while they're on their computers at work, and then more leisure users at night, say, or often we'll see that you have more desktop users in the daytime and more mobile users in the evening. And then you have different seasonality across different days of the week. So you can have different people come and use your product on the weekends than you would on the weekdays. So this is why it's really important to always capture a full business cycle so that you know you've captured everyone in that data set. So maybe you've released a feature and you measure the data over Monday to Wednesday, and you see that it's successful, is having a good positive impact. But it could still be that people that come to your site on the weekends, so maybe different kinds of people, they don't respond favorably to your feature. And if you don't run for a whole business cycle, then you don't have that representative sample to know overall how your customer base will respond. So we always recommend people run for at least 1 week or ideally 2 weeks. Of course, that's the end of the best practices. Just to recap, you should always start with a hypothesis. So always kind of plan out and set out in advance before you start looking at the data, exactly what it is you're going to test, how you're going to run the analysis, and what in the end is that decision criteria. And then take the time to set the right metrics. This is a really important step, can really change how valuable the experiment or the analysis is. Measure a handful and measure guardrail metrics as well. And then finally, beware of seasonality. Make sure you've got a representative sample. Of course, then, just to wrap up, I'm going to leave with 3 main takeaways. The first one, by running an experiment, by going that one step further, once you know your feature works, it lets you measure the value of your work, and it lets you learn from your customers. Second takeaway, experimentation can help you gain confidence and safety within your deployment cycles. It lets you have that extra bit of kind of scientific rigor and quantify exactly how confident you are at each step, and you're completely in control of the risks that you're taking. And then the final takeaway is just to keep these best practices in mind, because it helps you avoid getting human bias and error into your production, into your analysis. And that's what I've got. So thanks everyone for listening.
Cool, thanks a million, Lizzie. That was really interesting. I like the shoe bit with the hair. I shouldn't, but stuff like that is, I see stuff like that online the whole time. It's really a sneaky way of getting business, but I suppose it's not very good ethics, or it's not going to bring someone back to your website. I see people on LinkedIn sometimes do it as well. They like double click this and then brings you through. Or somebody had a Simpsons one up the other day with the trampoline, press the trampoline twice and you bounce up and down. It was like a post on Facebook for a business. So that's interesting the way to do it. But thanks a million for that. It was a really good talk. We'll open up to questions for any questions we have. We'll start off here with Carol. I'm just going to call them out if that's okay, just so they get picked up for the recording as well. So Carol Shawless, Carol spoke for us a couple months ago all the way from Texas. So thanks, Carol, for jumping in again. Carol, great topic. Thanks, Lizzie. What's your experience regarding these challenges with multivariate testing? A company having many competing experiments, parallel tests, a company not having clear criteria on what success looks like for these experiments, statistical significance, and pushing out untested environments that break other functionality or tracing events? I know I'm full of too many questions. Well, wouldn't expect any less, but you can see the question yourself, Lizzie, just to recap that as well. I'll just pick it up the recording, but thanks, Carol.
Thanks. How do I see the questions? Okay.
The Q&A box at the bottom there.
Yeah, got it. Yeah, so one thing I didn't talk about here, especially in the metrics side in this section, was testing too many things. So one issue with doing things like multivariate testing is you're testing many different variations, and that also brings you that extra chance of error. But then I think sometimes it's valuable. So it depends what you want to do at the end of the day. So if you're kind of doing a short-term optimization, then maybe sometimes this is good. If you want to do just a very kind of safe check, then A/B testing, just doing one variation, is usually better. So there's different use cases. So yeah, you can use experimentation to make a decision, to optimize something, or you can use it just for that safety that we saw. And depends what you want, but sometimes multivariate testing is the right thing to do, and sometimes it's not. Then next part of the question, let's see. Company having many parallel tests. So I actually think that this is not as much of a problem as it often seems to be. So it depends, again, the kind of things you're testing. If you're going to be testing two things on like the same item on the page, the same page, then it can bring some issues. But most of the time when people are running hundreds of tests in parallel, they're all on different sections. And then in the end, because you're using randomization individually for each test, kind of it evens out. So it's only really an issue if you're testing two things that conflict. So there's like the classic example of changing the color of text on a button and then changing the background color of a button. And if you're doing both of those at the same time, yes, that's a big problem. But as long as you're within the organization, talk to each other enough that you know you're not testing on the same feature, the same part of the site, then it shouldn't be a problem because we've got randomization. And then, so what about a company not having clear criteria on what success looks like? These experiments. Yeah, so that's really tough. And that's part of the reason of having a hypothesis. And yeah, deciding in advance what that decision criteria is super valuable. So some companies have like a kind of company-wide OKR or OEC, they call it, so overall evaluation criterion. And that means that basically everyone in the company is aligned behind one key metric. And that can be really useful for things like this to make sure that people are basing their decision on the same thing, that everyone's behind, but it's also got the same drawbacks of maybe the thing that you're trying to improve might not actually be directly related to that OEC. So as long as people kind of follow the guidelines of making sure they're measuring real business value, I think it's good to allow people to have their own different success criteria. Yeah, people pushing out untested experiments that break up a functionality. I mean, yeah, that's just not a good thing to do, of course. So ideally, everything goes out behind an experiment, and you have this in control.
Okay, cool. Thanks for that short question, Carl. Last day. But yeah, that's great stuff. Any other questions from anyone? Feel free to fire them in there quick. We have another minute or two for any more questions. If anyone would like to ask anything there.
I've got one. Hey, Lizzie, thanks so much for the talk and kicking us off. It was excellent. I really enjoyed it. I was just curious because you were talking about like the amount of data and like making sure that you have enough. You're saying if you use too small a data set, then you can miss things like, you know, seasonalities and, you know, weekends and all that kind of stuff. Is there a sweet spot for that? Or is it just like the longer you run it, the better?
Yeah, so always from kind of accuracy perspective, the longer you run it, the better. But then there's always going to be this balance of velocity, right? So it's often kind of, in my experience, I've had times when I'm kind of competing with a product manager who wants to get everything out really quick and they want to just increase this cycle. Then from data science perspective, you're like, well, no, we need this extra accuracy. So it's, in the end, it's like a business decision and you're trying to balance velocity versus confidence.
Yeah, makes sense. Thanks.
Okay, cool. Any more, or we can leave it there. If not, anyone else has any questions? Obviously, as per normal, we'll put the recording out tomorrow to everyone, and anyone who missed it, so you can share with your friends or your mates at work who might be interested in this talk tomorrow. So feel free to share across. If it's okay with Lizzie, I'll maybe just share her Twitter handle and LinkedIn in the email tomorrow. So anyone has any further thoughts or comments in future, I'm sure she'd be happy to speak to you at a respectable time and go through that. But Lizzie, really, thanks a million for joining us, particularly in the evening. I know you're really, really busy, as you said, in Berlin, with so much to do and so much to get out and see the sites and see the pubs and stuff as well. But yeah, like this has worked really well the last few months, as we said. Like the lockdown has been tough for people, so this is as much as a social thing for people as well, and even for your friends or colleagues that work in other companies, or even if they're not working in testing and other stuff as well. Feel free to invite your friends and colleagues along next month, even if they just want to log in and chat to people for an hour. It's nice to see other people. I know I love her to bits, but the only person I see all day is my missus, and there's only so much you can do with her and the dog all day as well. So it's nice seeing other people and chatting to other people as well. I'm sure everyone else feels the same. Darren's trying to keep a straight face there.
You're such a romantic, Patrick. You sweetheart, you.
The 39-week pregnant woman sitting upstairs, yeah. So we better not go too far on that. But just from topic-wise, so we have a good few bits booked in up until probably around Easter, April time at the moment. But again, open call. You don't have to speak or talk yourself. If there's anything you want to hear about, any topics, anything that's relevant to you, anything you're studying, anything you're doing at work that you think is good, feel free to drop Darren or I a message, and we'll go and find someone. As we said, we have access to top quality speakers, not just in Dublin and in Ireland. We can actually go worldwide and get people like Lizzie, Carol, people we've had this year and then over 2020 who've been excellent and have given up their time to come and talk for us as well. And hopefully when we get back to some sort of normality towards the end of the year and we have a bit of a hybrid model, we're going to have the plan, I suppose, for the year will be we're going to keep the online sessions going as well, because they've been really good and they give us access to really good speakers elsewhere. But also we will try, and when completely safe to do so and feasible, we'll try and have a small element of bringing stuff on site as well, probably towards the end of the year. And I think it's going to be like everyone's work-life balance. It might be 1 on-site and 3 online. It'll be kind of the situation, I think, over a couple of months as well. But it would be nice to have a social element of the meetup as well. That's why they were starting a couple of years ago, not just for the information and upskilling people, but so that people can meet. And we've had so many people who've moved to Ireland over the years from different European countries and all around the world. And when they come here, you might not know anybody, you might not have friends or family here, and it's obviously tough for people this year. But having a community where you're actually talking to people who work in similar environments and have similar interests, and people are friendly. The biggest strength of the meetups we've had over the last year or so was if people have a topic they want to hear about, whether it's we don't have to go and find the speaker. If you message anyone in this group and ask for a bit of help, or you ask for advice on something you're doing, or career advice, or something you're learning in work, I can guarantee you nearly every single person will come back with a positive answer, which is really good as well. So there's a real good community of 2,000 people there, not just people who jump in and do meetups and log-ons as well, but people get help day to day, and they have a chat with people as well, which is really, really important. So we'll leave it there. I had a lovely line I had this week, particularly with the testers. Everyone stay positive and test negative. It'd be really great at the moment. Darren just wants the word to swallow him.
You should be ashamed of yourself.
And that's basically it. So we'll leave it there. Lizzie, thanks.
On that bombshell.
And, we'll talk to everyone in a few weeks' time. Okay. Take care. Bye now, everyone.
Look, bye.